usually have a quick read through the paper and then write the first part of my review, which is just going to be a quick summary of what I think the key outcome of the paper is.
I just read through relatively quickly. I jot down some initial comments that occur to me, sort of double check to make sure that I can access all the data, the methods, all the supplemental material that the authors refer to in their paper.
I try and have a read through it just to know what I'm up against, and then it also sits in the back of my mind.
Marking interesting sections and adding comments as I go.
But it sets the basis for like all of my comments are going to be to help refine and strengthen what I think the core contribution of the paper is. So that sets the tone for the rest of the review.
I put those larger questions sort of towards the beginning of my review, because I think those are the things that are most critical to address. And then I provide a list of sort of all the minor things that I think would help to make the paper more understandable and would help support the author's conclusions a bit better.
I definitely do some sort of editing of my notes as I build an understanding of the paper, of the approach. Sometimes something is not clear in one part, but then it becomes clear later on, and then I just edit my comments to indicate, well, maybe you should make it clear already at this point, or maybe you should refer to the next section at this point already.
What I find the best reviews that I've received, the most actionable reviews that I've received, are the ones that focus on the core message and not the grammatical errors or specific word choice, that really help me direct the thinking about the science.
I think a lot of times we get so focused on our specific methods and tools that sometimes we don't realize that what seems very clear and easy to us may not be as easily understood by somebody who hasn't spent 5 years perfecting this particular method.
I say in the third paragraph of the discussion, the phrasing could be interpreted to mean A, or it could be interpreted to mean B. Which did the authors mean?
But I try to be quite specific about what point I'm not getting, or that I don't think a broad audience will get, and what needs to be done.
I often put myself in the perspective of maybe a less specialist reader, so I can maybe understand certain aspects of it, but then I would recommend to clarify nonetheless for readers that perhaps do not have this particular expertise that I have. I usually work with 2 PDFs side by side, one for the main text and one for the figures, because some journals put the figures at the end and some put them in the main text, but then you're still scrolling a lot.
So I think I read almost every review twice. I read it first quite quickly, I might take a few notes, but very few notes, maybe some like key points, and then do the review properly when I have a span of time, and then I already have some idea where the paper's going, and I can sit down and take the detailed notes that I then want to send to the author.
I generally like printing out papers only because when I try to review papers just on my computer, I get far too easily distracted, by my computer, by emails, by my phone. And so it helps me to just print out the paper and, go sit somewhere quietly and just, go through and read it. And there's also something about the process of just writing in notes in the margins that I find also very, very helpful.
Once you've kind of read the abstract and maybe the introduction, sometimes I skip to the discussion. And so I understand where the endpoint is, so that when I'm reading through the meat of the paper, looking at the primary data and how it's been presented, I can already have in my mind, like, is this serving the goal of the paper, or is it wandering? Is there too much data in here that doesn't end up being interpreted? Is there a different way it could be presented to make it more linear for readers?
As an author and an editor, what I really want to see is how to make it better. So comments that are just broad or negative without telling you what to do about it are not useful.
Like a brief review is actually the best because it emphasizes what you think the core issues are. And if you write 2 or 3 main points, but then you have 10 more pages of line edits, sometimes the key revisions that you want to see lose volume, and you'll see that the author's doing a whole bunch of work, but they haven't addressed the things that you think are most important.
As an author, I like any reviews that are specific. The more specific the better. I mean, I've certainly gotten reviews where it's been almost vague to the point where you're not quite sure how to address it, or what you would need to do to address what you think the reviewer is trying to get at.
Generally, I really appreciate it if the reviewers can pick out mistakes. Of course, I don't like to see this, but I rather have these mistakes being picked out in this stage than when the paper is published and it's effectively frozen.
In a recent paper where there was a lot in the paper that made the reviewers want to discuss the science. It was very difficult to incorporate that conversation and the insights that came out of it actually into the manuscript where it would see the light of day.
Yeah, I've had reviews where the reviewer said, "Oh, this is not clear." And then to me, of course, as an author, it is crystal clear. So it was difficult then for me to exactly extract where I needed to improve the explanation.
For me, it typically ranges maybe a day to a couple of days, and that's cumulatively, right? I'm not spending like 2 days straight just sitting and looking at this paper.
So the amount of time varies a lot between papers, and I guess that's often tricky to know when you accept one. You have a look at the abstract and kind of that I set myself a time limit on. If I'm really starting to spend days on this, then I'm spending too much time, and I need to send it back to the authors with right, here's the broad thing you need to fix.
Average journal article, I think minimum is probably about 4 hours, and if it gets more than 8, I've done too much.
Seismica's sort of goal of transparency and the fact that the reviews are published alongside the papers, I think, could help contribute to reviews that are a little more thoughtful. And knowing that your comments are going to be out there available for anyone to look at, sort of a good way to continue to be held accountable.
Like many things in the geosciences, we're not the first out of the gate to do this. I think people are more honest and more careful to be objective when their words are going to be seen in public, even if they keep their name off of it. So even if the review is published anonymously.
Fortunately, I've never had very nasty reviewer comments, but I know that people occasionally get them. And by making these reviews public, I think the tone of the conversation could be more professional and more neutral.
I guess you can still hide behind anonymity, but you at least know that, okay, whatever I write here, people will be able to see it when the paper's published. They can look at the comments alongside. When the reader says it and goes like, oh, what about this? Maybe the reviewers picked it up and look at it. Oh yeah, the reviewers did pick that up and this was the author's response. It just gives a bit more chance to see how the process works.
That was something that when we were designing the policies for Seismica, I felt strongly about. I think reviews, like I said, it's an act of generosity by the reviewer, and reviewers, I don't think that we should be gatekeepers as reviewers. I think we should be door openers. And I think the Seismica policies reflect that paradigm.